person that I'd like to nominate would be a guy that I've worked with for quite a few years now, and he's at the cutting edge of creating these collaborative workplaces. And he's actually working in, he was working in construction and mining
Wow.
domain. Yeah. So
Talking about
he's
completely different environments. We go from
100%
regulation to mining. That's interesting.
fascinating. And what he's done in that space, I think, is a conversation worth having, because, you know, engineering principles meet agility and amazing things happen. So his name is Will McNelis, and I would 100% recommend engaging with him as well.
Hi. In this interview, Will McNelis talks about 1. His false commute, 2. His career bike path, 3. What is the most powerful thing for him, and 4. What is Ikigai, and in this case, what is his Ikigai?
I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button, because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. And with me, I have Will McNelis. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and before we jump in immediately, let's see where you are and where I am. And normally, if everything goes fine, we should see on screen more or less. This is actually, I would say, I was about to say my house, but actually it's my old house. We built a new one, but let's not go completely into details. But this is in Belgium, and Will is in the complete other side of the world. So Google will help us to travel the world and then see that we actually end up in Australia, in Brisbane, Australia, if I remember correctly.
That's right. And it is
And
almost
so
exactly on the other side.
Yes, I think, yeah, my father always says that if I drill a hole in our garden, we end up in Australia or something like that. And so for me, it's 20 minutes after midnight. And for you, Will, what's the time at your side at this moment?
20 past 8 in the morning.
20 past 8 in the morning. So you see, this is what we all do to have these recordings for each and everyone alive here. And yeah, that's the interesting part. That's also thanks to the technology that we have these options to do these kind of conversations this way. Okay, Will, tell us a little bit about you. Before I jump into these questions, what is something that is interesting? Well, who are you? Let's start with that.
Okay, I'm not sure. So I actually, even though I'm in Australia, I'm originally from the United States, and grew up in a small coastal city called Charleston in South Carolina on the east coast of the States, and moved over to Australia. I guess it's over 10 years ago now, but I've been living over here, and I am an agile coach, and I guess a solopreneur. And work with organizations largely in Australia, but in the Asia Pacific region, some more regional businesses, but working with them to on their agile transformations. So that's my day job.
And you in the pre-conversation you said, and just before when we contacted, you said you were just moving back from the United States, just family, or you were there on business? Or?
Yeah, no, I was back. I did do some work remotely while I was there with some of the leadership teams I'm working with. But I was back visiting family, so it was the first trip back since the recent unpleasantness. So since
Yeah,
COVID,
okay.
And I actually had planned a trip back, and I was going to be flying on March 30th, 2020, and the Australian borders closed on the 29th of March. So that trip obviously didn't happen. So it's been several years since I was able to get back and visit family. So it was the reason for the trip was just to go back and see my mom, my sisters, and nieces and nephews, and just really get some good quality family time. So it was awesome.
Yeah, well, it's awesome that you were able to visit them now, but I can imagine if you were not able to see them for 2 years, that's well, only remote, I assume.
Yeah,
And that was probably a lot less awesome.
yeah, it was. But I think that everybody, even people that are in the same country as their family and loved ones, had the same thing. So I don't think it was I don't think it's just the expats that had this. I think
True.
it's everybody. So I think we're all doing a great reconnection with family this year, which is great.
And you were probably more used to not seeing your family because you lived in another part of the world than most of us in
Yeah,
that.
and had the patterns in place to do to do
Yeah.
video chat and FaceTime and whatever it is to make that connection. So already kind of had those habits in place, where I think other people had to create them for the first time, I suppose.
Yeah, I know friends of mine who had for the first time video chat with parents and people because some people never done that, didn't even have the tools or didn't even know how to use the tools. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you say we have everything up in place, just like some of us did that already for work also before, and others had to learn it almost immediately.
Exactly.
So that break. Well, it of course depends on when people listen to this video, but I think for most of the people, if living in 2022, then you know exactly what we're talking about. The last years have been a big change for a lot of that.
That's it.
Okay, let's go into that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah. So I guess the something that's been a huge influence on me is that to borrow a phrase from my wife, I have a career bike path, and one of those paths was commercial fishing. So I was a commercial fisherman for 4 years, and worked on shrimp boats, or prawn trawlers as we call them in Australia, and was
Wow.
a commercial oysterman, also clams, crabs, pretty much things that come from the sea. Growing up in a coastal town, and the I think it's something I'm still very passionate about. Sustainable seafood and sustainable fishing, and my family back in the States still runs commercial oyster farms and things like that. And the reason why it influenced me, though, is that whenever we started, my brother-in-law and I started a commercial fishing business, and we weren't very good at it, and it's hard work.
Oh,
It's very hard work. So and this is before I was into agility or had even heard of agility. And we had to figure out how to make it work. And the really process improvement was what we had to do, and didn't have all the frameworks and some of the theory behind it that I'm able to leverage now. But we learned as we went, and we ended up innovating with how the business was run, and how the fish were caught or gathered, and ended up creating a sustainable and successful fishing business out of it. So that I think just really it drilled in the process improvement mindset, Kaizen, if you will. It really drilled that into me before I knew what it was. So I think that a lot of times I still I love abstractions. That's just me, but I still abstract situations with large corporate organizations that I work with back to, how does this relate to gathering 50-pound sacks of oysters times 50 of them. So that's probably something that most people don't know about my career bike path, but that was a big part of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like you say, you start something and you figure out while you're busy that okay, it doesn't work that well, or like you said, you were not yet good at it. So basically, what I'm understanding is on a daily basis, you have to figure out how to become better the next day and the next day and the next day to hopefully make it sustainable as fast as possible,
Yeah,
because otherwise you go out of business.
yeah.
That's a
Our
good
first
way to learn about agility because there's
it
no
is
other option.
it is our first day. We made negative $20, so we grew from there.
Well, it grew on the positive side, I hope. Well, and if you made it sustainable, that's what you did. Um, so that's interesting. Well, I like it because for me, a lot about what we do with agility is indeed we learn, and the what I've noticed is a lot of people who are better at it, they do it out of some kind of necessity when they learned it. So you, that's kind of the story that I'm hearing. You had no other choice to become better at that on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. And I think it's not necessarily the better at agility or worse at agility. I think it's more the, when you're driven by that necessity. If we're talking, the lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy, if you're really driven by those, then you really, to borrow a term from Stranger in a Strange Land, you grok it. You understand it at its core level because you have to improve and to satisfy those core needs, food, shelter, water.
Well, minus $20, you cannot sustain for a long period. That's for sure. So,
About 2 days.
yeah, I can imagine.
We're back in the mid 90s at this point. So yeah, that was about 2 days. We could
Yeah,
sustain that.
so that's definitely then you need to be able to get some money, and then you still need to make up for the minus 20 or the minus 40, depending on how long it took you to get there.
That's it.
So that's it. And you're correct. It's not about that agility. It's about results in the end.
Hmm.
It's about making sure that things get it better, and it doesn't matter if it's agile or waterfall or whatever. You just need to make sure that you make money as fast as possible. And if you
Yeah,
do
that's
it
it.
with two people, it's well, you need also money and income for both of you,
Yeah.
basically. So
At,
that's
at the time, the income was our biggest feedback loop.
and it's well, it's a very concrete feedback loop, I would say. If at the end of the day you look at your, yeah, what is it, I don't know, a pot where you put the money in and you see that there's less money, and then in the beginning of the day, then you know that you're in trouble if
Yeah,
you
that's
don't
it.
get money in there. So that's that's a very yeah, that's the kind of stories I'm looking for, because indeed
Yeah,
that has a huge impact.
yeah.
And it kind of yeah, go ahead. Is there
I
some
was just
more?
going to say it's like it's also the other thing that it drove is not just how to improve process, because there's only so hard you can work. It's all very labor intensive, no matter what sort of fishing you're doing. It's all very
Mm.
labor intensive. But there's only so hard you can work. So working harder and harder and harder to make more and more money, that's not sustainable. So it's what it really drove with this is how to innovate within the business model. So how commercial fishing is done. And the what we ended up doing is taking it online. So I had a career in IT, or a career. I had another career bike path in IT at the same time. So we actually blended the two, and started online sales of shellfish, and we ran a series of experiments to see how that would work, which were some successful, some not, most not, but we're able to build on the ones that were successful. But because we didn't have much income, we had to start small and figure out what worked, and then build on what worked. And it's really that
And
side of
drop the
things.
things that didn't work,
Correct,
basically.
correct. We
So
couldn't
that
couldn't
helped you to focus because you didn't have the option to do everything.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's a big, well, that's one thing that I really like, because if you talked before about larger, bigger clients, sometimes larger clients have too much money and too much options, and they say, let's do it all. and you learned in a very small business, like, okay, I cannot do it all. I just need to, like you say, there's only a limited amount of time and energy that you can put in. So if you would do everything, you would burn out, because there's only 24 hours for everyone, and hopefully you sleep a little bit. So there is a limit there. So you choose only to do, okay, this one works, this doesn't. Okay, let's improve on the one that does
even
work.
for large organizations, innovation, there's certain containers in which, as we know, there's certain containers in which innovation happens, and rarely does it happen without a constraint of some form. So with large organizations, one of the easiest things to implement is, if there is an organization that's running an internal startup of sorts, introducing the budget constraint is one of the ways to get people to start thinking outside of the square.
Yeah, but usually, as long as they don't do that, they think that they have all the options and all the time. But actually, and they think it's an advantage, and I consider it a disadvantage, because like you say, if you have that constraint, you need the innovation, you need the creativity to make it work better. That's already a lot of interesting stories there. And you also kind of explained already that second question that I have. If you had not been to IT, what would have become of you? But you said you had how do you call it, a bike career, so that you had multiple,
a career bike path.
A career bike path. So is there more stories like this? Did you do other things outside IT?
We could go on for the next few hours about different career paths I could have taken. It's I guess if I hadn't been in IT, so I was doing the commercial fishing. I started that kind of, I guess, before I was in IT, but after I had started learning about IT. So those were kind of in parallel. But if I hadn't gotten into IT, my first what I went to university for first was a degree in recording engineering. So my first path that I chose was recording engineering. So recording bands in studios, and one of my passions to this day is music. And
you're a guitar player. Do I remember that correctly?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Guitar. Yeah, played guitar. I've played in bands. Currently playing bands here in Australia, and in the recent past, up until COVID, some of them were actually touring bands and things like that. So yeah, music is a career, but realized early on that a career to make a living, the working musician, that's a tough one, even harder than commercial fishing. So I ended up going and got a degree in recording engineering. So working with bands in studios and live sound, and I ended up following the live sound path for a bit. So I toured around with bands in the States, regional touring acts, national touring acts, and was worked on the crew doing the live sound. So setting up, running sound for the event, and then tearing down at the end, and did that for a few years. Got into doing some corporate events as well whenever there weren't tours on. Whenever I was doing that, though, I got interested in something at the time that was called digital media. This is back in the mid 90s. So that has since branched off into a bunch of different things. But got into was interested in the internet, and cool, how do we design a website? How do you build a website? That sort of thing. And that kind of led me down the other path. I hit a decision point where the lifestyle of touring with bands isn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for me. It is for some people, but it wasn't the rock and roll lifestyle. It's you're there at 6 a.m. starting to set up, work all day. The band plays, or the bands play, and then at midnight you start tearing it down until about 6 a.m, and then you go to the next location. So it's a hard lifestyle. It's not the rock and roll lifestyle that some of us have in our heads or in our dreams. So it was hit a decision point and said, okay, I want to explore this other thing, and got into this digital media and got my second degree in that, and worked as a visual designer for some time, and then from there kind of went farther and farther into the tech stack, I suppose, with websites and application development and marketing automation platforms and things like that.
Which is also sometimes a kind of rock and roll style life, but a completely different one than the one on the road, I would say.
That's it. And then I've had a bunch of different career paths. I think one of the things I'm most thankful for is I have parents, or well, had one parent, still have my mom, and they very much always encouraged me to experiment and to follow what I want to do, and also instilled a work ethic in me. You have to work, you have to support yourself, but how you do that is up to you. And I followed a bunch of different paths, and I ran a kayak eco tour business, doing camping trips, island hopping along the South Carolina coast for a while. I've worked in building houses. I was a boat builder for a while. I built my own boat, and that I used as one of the fishing fleet. I have done a bunch of different things, but the interesting thing is that whenever I moved to Australia, though, I suddenly was out of my comfort zone and had to find a job, and kind of went down the path of IT, working on an agile team as a UX designer, as a project manager, as I had different roles, but all kind of around application development and IT, and kind of stumbled into agile coaching. And whenever I found coaching, that was, the Japanese have the concept of ikigai, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but
like most of us.
Yeah, exactly. But that was me finding my ikigai, and for those that don't know what that is, that's the confluence of something that you're good at, something you enjoy doing, something the world benefits from, something that you can make money doing, and finding that confluence of those things. For me, that was coaching, and I've never looked back from there. That's I also haven't, that's all the different career paths I have met with that, and I don't see them diverging again. That's the path now. That's my ikigai.
I like the way you say it, because like you said, well, you mentioned so many different career paths and different kind of things that you jumped on. And at the same time, I see, there's actually quite a few agile coaches that were musicians or were somehow linked into music. So I see a lot of, I don't know if there's resemblance, that not that, but somehow we attract people that are interested in both. I would say.
Yeah, the band that I was most recently in, the three out of five were agile coaches, and not because we knew each other from the agile coaching community. We knew each other from the music community, and yeah, 3 out of 5 of us were coaches. So there must be something to it.
So that's how it feels, at least to me sometimes. But it's interesting, because when you say it, indeed, you felt support by your parents, like, okay, you can do it, you can choose whatever you want, but don't forget, you need to pay the money, you need to pay the bills. Basically, that's what I hear you say. And sometimes that was hard, and some of what you started to say, and sometimes I like the way you said it about, okay, being on the road with bands. It's probably is very rock and rollish for the people who are on stage, but everybody who's around it's a lot less. And even there, I would dare to say that the biggest musicians there, they cannot really afford to have a real rock and roll lifestyle. They have to be very fit, they have to be very strict and take care of their body, because otherwise you can't sustain it for another 20 years or whatever on the road. So
100%.
So even there, it's probably a lot less rock and roll than it feels when we're in our 20s or something like that.
It's pretty much a myth, the rock and roll lifestyle. The musicians I worked with, they were very dedicated, very disciplined. They weren't partying.
And that's also a lot what I see in again in the agile coaching. It's like, okay, sometimes from the outside world, agile sounds like, oh, you're a bunch of cowboys doing whatever you want, and actually on the inside, all of us, we know, no, this is probably the most rigorous and the most habit-like way of developing both softwares and teams. It's not just do as you wish that you want to do, but it just isn't always what it looks like on the outside. Let's put it like that.
That's it.
Okay, I want to go to that next question. If you look back on everything, what is your biggest challenge? And well, I would say the biggest challenge that you want to share, because sometimes people don't want to share their biggest challenge. But what's the biggest challenge you want to share, and why is that a good thing for you?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest challenges in the past, and this might be apparent from my career bike path, but is starting things and not finishing things. And I say in the past because why was that a problem? I think there were a couple aspects to it. I think one aspect was discipline, and the using agile, actually having the theory and the framework, so not just doing it by feel like we were doing it first, but actually understanding the theory behind it, and being able to apply that to myself, not just to work and to clients, but applying it to myself helped me through some of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that finding my true why, or my ikigai, or once I found coaching and all those paths converged, suddenly that problem combined with an agile or agility frameworks and practices and an agile mindset has kind of that problem sort of faded. I think my biggest current problem, and it's been a problem in the past as well, and it's something that I suspect will always be something I'll need to be continuously working on, is saying yes without saying no to something else. I'm very
Which
passionate.
is not really for me, both are linked. You cannot say yes without saying no, and you cannot say no if, well, it's much easier to say no if you have a real hard yes for something else, I would say.
It is and it's it's I'm passionate about what I do, both in work and in my personal life. I still have personal projects and things that are outside of the work remit, but I'm very passionate about them, and it's I want to do things, and I overcommitting myself is something that I will constantly need to work on, because I know that limit your whip. That's how you start finishing, stop starting. It's easy for me to say these things to leadership teams
Clients.
that I work with, or to agile teams that I'm coaching. It's easy for me to say that, but I think that thinking about my own personal journey, it gives me a sense of empathy for those people, and I understand why you don't, or I understand some of the reasons why. There's many angles or reasons why people might not say no to one thing if they're saying yes to something else. But yeah, I think that's probably one of my biggest challenges, personally. Yeah, there's others from my own personal work as a leader. Something I've been working on a lot recently is the people that I lead. So currently in my current role with my main client that I'm working for right now, I lead a team of agile coaches and iteration managers. and it's how to let go of control. Even though it's very, again, this is something that that I, we as coaches talk to leaders about all the time, about being servant leaders and things like that. But it's also because I guess maybe my excuse is because I'm passionate about something, I need to have control and make sure it's as good as it possibly can be. But actually, the way to do that is to relinquish control.
Yeah, because you probably, because you've done some of that work that these other agile coaches are doing, you might see some of the solutions, and then I can imagine. Well, if I look at my past, it's sometimes very tempting to jump in and say, okay, this is what you need to do, and even if it's correct, it doesn't help them to tell them. They will have to discover it, and sometimes run into the wall themselves before they will understand it. And yeah, it's for me at least. I don't know how it's for you, but for me at least, it's sometimes hard to not say anything, know they will hit the wall, and know that you cannot prevent it in a sense. Well, if it's
Yeah.
dangerous, if lives are at stake, it's of course easy to then jump in. But if life are not at stake, sometimes the best way is to let them run into a wall. But that's, well, it's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, and that's it. We have a duty of care. It's obviously, if lives are at stake, safety is always going to be both physical and psychological. Safety is always going to be we have a big duty of care there. And need to step in early, and but even just commercially, for organizations we work with, there is a duty of care, and we have to leverage that against individual or team growth within those organizations. I find that oftentimes the best thing for the organization commercially is for that individual and team growth, as well as for the people themselves. But the payoff, though, and I guess I've been working with myself, and also being coached myself, with this is the payoff. I've been doing it long enough now that I've seen the payoff, and the payoff is whenever you see those coaches that you're working with on your team, you see them start to really blossom and get to the point where you're like, oh, if I am going to continue to lead this person, I need to lift my game, because they got it.
They're ahead of me.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the payoff. That's the payoff.
I recognize that, and it's from the moment you do this for more than 5 or 10 years, you automatically you see other stuff that people around you might not always see, but that it's better to sometimes just, okay, put someone else. And I understand that struggle, because there is somewhere between, like, okay, I should, well, be worth my money, and I need to be the senior agile coach, whatever that means, and I have to show that I'm worth. And at the same time, like, yeah, but my worth is maybe to just step back and not have the ego to step in and let them shine, because that's what's happening. And it is hard, because you know that people are watching you to do the right thing as a senior agile coach, and actually they think that means you have to tell them, where well, like you say, sometimes the best thing is to let them grow, and to let people around you see that, hey, it's not just me, these are 5 or 10 other people who are actually all able and capable of doing, if I let them.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And you were saying something very important that I want to stress as well. You not only said from doing the work, but also from being coached. Could you say some more about that? How is that for you to be coached yourself?
Yeah, it's actually very, very topical right now. I just kind of hit a point just just a week ago or so. I guess whenever you travel, for me anyway, whenever I travel, um, especially back to see family and back, remembering where I'm from and things like that. It's always that time for reflection. and thinking about where I am now and where I want to go. Anytime I travel, especially back to where I was raised, or where I grew up, but even any sort of travel, it's always this time of reflection for me. I don't know if it is for everybody, but it is for me. As part of that reflection, and as I returned back to Australia, I've realized that, one of the things I'm really missing right now is a coach for myself. And I guess early on, I was lucky in that I had a really just really good coach and mentor early on in my career as a coach, and realized early that no matter how much we know about coaching, no matter how many books we read, no matter how much we do it or experience we have, we can't coach ourselves. It's just it's not possible. You can't do it. And one of the things I don't know about your experience. One of the things I found is that I see a lot of coaches that don't actually receive coaching themselves. They don't have a coaching relationship with someone else. And it's one of the things that I found is the most powerful for me. Is it's not an always thing, but it is a at certain times sort of things. I really need someone in my in my corner to help me, to ask me the hard questions, and to really make me think about my motivation, or what my ways to overcome a challenge. And it's one of the most important things for me is being coached myself, because it's easy for us to go and sell to other people, but we need to sell it to ourselves as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's two parts of it. What I'm hearing, and I hear both of your answers, but I want to stress it out a little bit. There is the part that, of course, you need to learn yourself, and you need to have someone who shows you a mirror, because we all need that. And I think I kind of recognize the people that are used to that, because you grow on a different level, and sometimes faster. But what I've also noticed is that there is also agile coaches who've never been coached themselves, and they don't always realize what it is to be coached. And like you said earlier on, when you talked about the leaders that you're helping out, the fact that you struggle yourself with that focus, that you struggle yourself with some of the same challenges that they have, it makes you understand much better some of their problems. And you might be further on the path for some of the things, and maybe less further for other things. But the fact that you understand that, and that you have a similar path, helps. And for me, that's the same thing with coaching. If you've never been coached yourself, how do you understand how people sometimes feel with interacting with coaches? Sometimes being coached the mirror can be a little bit too close, and then it
Very
can be really
confronting
frightening.
sometimes. Yeah,
Exactly. That's the kind of thing. And it's not that it's needed, that it's not needed, but when it's so confronting, at some point it's scary. It's like, yeah, you're probably right, but does it have to happen now? Is this that's the kind of thing. And if you had that experience, like you explained so well, it helps a lot.
yeah, it's developing empathy, not just for problems that people we work with are facing, but for how it feels to work through that problem. And sometimes, sometimes we can, as coaches, we can cut to the quick, the quick of the nail, and it hurts sometimes, and we need to be careful with that. Number one, but we have a duty of care for the person, and respect for the person that we're working with. But unless we feel that ourselves, how can we recognize it in somebody else? I think it's an important thing.
And I'm sure the fact you say that you said it so nicely, that you hit when people tell you as a coach, they go very quickly to the problem. I'm sure that I've done that in the past, that I was too quick and that I was so quick that the other person, that I completely lost them. And now I realize that sometimes I need to show them a little bit on the path, that they can see it, and only then are they ready for it. And if I show you, this is where the problem is, look at it, they will just, well, it won't help them, even if I'm right. And first of all, I could be wrong, because I'm just the coach. I'm not the well, the coachee might be having a different problem. But what's worse is that even if I'm right, it doesn't help them. So yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for showing, because that's the kind of thing that I think is really important for many people to realize. And like you say, we need to find that. And for me, and you said already, like, okay, you need that to maybe sometimes look for someone else. I know that I've had multiple coaches along my path, and sometimes I have a coach that I'm working with for a long time. And sometimes I work with multiple coaches that I work on different kind of things. So for me, at least, I've noticed that I like to work with different kind of people, and sometimes combined, because somehow it feels like, okay, I feel that this kind of person might, yeah, show me the right mirror. How is that for you? Is that something that you prefer, just one person? How does that work for you?
Yeah, no, it's again, I do have one person that is my mentor and my go-to. But it can be dependent on what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to work through. Out of network of coaches, there are people that a bunch of people that I've worked with, and depending on what the for the more specific, not the longer term, but the more specific, if there's a certain project that I'm working on or something like that, and I'm having problems with it, it might be situation specific for who I might ask to be in my corner and help me to work through, help to coach me to work through a problem or a situation or something like that. So it's situational, but I think, like you said, there is one person that's a more longer term relationship.
Yeah, I recognize that and again, this might be actually a real cool thing to ask people to put into comments. And how does that work for you? Do you have multiple coaches? Are you coached? Don't you work with coaches? What are the challenges there? That might be something nice to have a small conversation in the comments. I want to go to the next question, is that because it feels already in this conversation that you're a driven person, and your career path makes me think this as well. The fact that you jump to something, I feel a lot of passion there. So do you know what drives you?
Absolutely. My purpose is to help organizations and individuals achieve their true potential. That's what drives me for work, and it's like I guess, like any purpose, there's a lot of thought that has gone into that. That phrase means a lot to me, and it drives me at a very deep level. One of the things that I gives me the truest sense of achievement is to see somebody I've been working with realize what their potential could be at a deep level. That motivates me.
And it's already at the realization stage, so it doesn't mean that they've achieved it already, but just by working with them, that they realize, oh, thanks to working with Will, I now see that I could become this, or that this is my calling, or whatever it is. But that could be my potential. That's what I'm hearing.
And that's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's not the achieving it. It's the realizing what it could be at a deep level. And it's not just a work thing. So it is, but it's not the sales pitch for Will. It actually is my purpose. even within my friend group and my community, I don't coach my friends. I don't coach people in my community necessarily. I do sometimes with community groups and things like that. But pro bono sort of work. But but even within friend groups, I think we, out of respect for the people that are in our lives, we should all be helping each other to realize what our potential could be, and it's if we know somebody that has an idea or something, how to help them to start to realize whether it's or to support them in their goals. So it's I don't know if I'm explaining that particularly well, but yeah, I think it's that motivates me. That's what drives me.
I think I recognize it, because indeed it's tempting is probably the wrong word, but I recognize that when I talk and work with friends, indeed, asking the curious questions to just see if they can help figuring out what they want. It's at the same time sometimes hard, because, like you said, you don't want to, or at least I don't want to coach my friends.
No.
And I don't want them to feel coached or anything at all. So that's definitely not something.
See, I have coached friends before, but only whenever they have asked me.
But that's the thing with coaching. People, exactly. People need to come to you and say, okay, and I would like to have help from you, or will you coach me? With a friend's relationship, or with a partner, definitely, I think my wife would kill me if I would try to coach her into some of the things. No. That's definitely not something I want to go to. But at the same time, we sometimes see potential in the friends and the loved ones around us, and okay, then we want to help them figuring it out. And that's a difficult balance.
But there's other support. There's other support that
exactly.
we can give, other than coaching. Sometimes it's, look, it might be advice, the antithesis of coaching. We can, or it might just be support or encouragement. It can take in a personal zone. It can take many different forms other than coaching. I'd say coaching is probably the lower percentage of how I would support my immediate personal group. But for work, though, I mean, it does say coach on my business card. So that is the default for the organizations that I work with. But
then you're also asked. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the purpose part. Very nice, because it's something recognized. You're not the first one that says this as not maybe the exact same words, but a similar kind of thing on what drives people. We want to create a better world and help the people around them to find that better world, whatever that means for them. And that usually is a little bit different for each of us. And so that kind of brings me also to, what do you consider for yourself your biggest achievement, or is there something that you're really proud of, that you say, okay, this is your moment to brag, basically?
I'm not a braggy kind of person. Although now that I've said that, whatever I say next is going to come off sounding braggy.
But that's the goal of the question. That's the goal of the question. This is the permission you have now to do it. And it's I like the fact, I think you're the first one who says it on camera. I'm not the braggy kind of person. And actually, a lot of people have said this already off camera. Then they afterwards say, yeah, wasn't I too much bragging about this or that I achieved? And sometimes we need to get that permission, and I think this is why that question is in there. So go ahead, shine away.
It's I'm gonna go pretty personal with it. Number one, as far as work is concerned, I don't have I haven't yet. I think I will, but I haven't yet written a book or anything like that. Any big personal project that I can point people to. But I think just my biggest achievement, I think if we think about me as the project, is just to creating the life that I have right now. And by that, what I mean is, you know, I've worked through a lot of change in my life. Moving countries. My wife is Australian, and hence why we are now living in Australia, and have very close. We both have very close ties to the States as well. But moving countries like that, and I owned, or was partner of, owned one, was partner of another, two businesses. Whenever I moved here, I had a very full life there, and let it go, and moved over here to see what might happen. And the life that I've created, moving here, finding coaching, finding that ikigai, and I'd say that's my biggest achievement. I truly enjoy what I do, and
That's
my
a
life.
nice achievement, because
Yeah,
yeah, just today I've been talking with someone who's who, actually, it's a conversation with two people where one of them was kind of similar to what you said, really happy in what this person did, and the other person was basically kind of burned out and completely not happy. And yeah, if you compare these two, definitely being happy and finding your calling and doing that, and being really happy with the life you have, I think many people would, jealous is maybe again the wrong word, but really would say this is a really good thing to achieve. So that's a nice thing.
yeah.
And I can imagine leaving behind, well, not just the country, but then also businesses, also family that is there, and then going all across the world to another part to finally then find that. That's an extra bonus, I would say, on top of
It
all of
is,
that.
it is, and it's. I have I always tell people whenever they say if I miss where I'm from and miss family, the answer, of course, is yes, deeply. But I am lucky enough that no matter where I am in the world, I'm going to be missing somewhere. I'm going to be missing
Mhm.
people somewhere else. I'm going to be, and that's that can be a hard thing, but it's I consider myself lucky for having that challenge. It's a good thing ultimately.
Because it also means that wherever you go, you have other people that you can feel at home to, and that you, that you feel welcome. So that's
Yeah.
also part of maths. And yeah, this we live in a world where there's a lot of FOMO with people, that all about fear of missing people, fear of missing out things, events, whatever is happening. And in that kind of environment, it's really hard to be happy about the here and now, and the people around us. And that's
Yeah.
that is indeed something also to be very, very happy about, if you can achieve that.
Hmm.
That's a nice extra bonus, I would say. I want to go to, and you already hinted a little bit about some of these things. But for me, when I do Who's Agile, what I've noticed is that most Agile people, and this is why I added this question in the video series, that most people have some kind of things on how they behave, things that they need to become, well, better or whatever to do. And so that is something that they want to share. So is there something that you can share, that you want to share?
Yeah, a tip. Yeah, I think I'm constantly running experiments with
Mm.
myself, how I work, my
That's
personal
already a
agility.
tip on its own.
Yeah,
Just constantly doing experiments.
yeah. Examples of those. So my current experiment is I'm going paperless with my personal workflow, my personal agility workflow.
Mhm.
Um, and this is off the back of going digital free, running that. So we're
Mhm.
kind of running these two. I use metrics, so I gather. I'm an absolute data geek. I love metrics, and
Mm.
data driven decisions. But I collect a lot of metrics of both my personal productivity, as well as to be able to measure, are these experiments working for me? I'm constantly experimenting with how I work. I'd say if I had the biggest tip, though, I'd say the biggest thing would be a lot of times, and it kind of even says it in the word, personal agility. It's very inwardly focused. It's very focused on me. And I think one of the things that people lose sight of there is that one of the cornerstones of agility is feedback loops. So how do you have a feedback loop with yourself? We live in our echo chambers, and we have confirmation bias, whether we like it or not. Even if we know we have it, we still have it. So how
That's the hard part about biases. Even if you know they're there, they're still there. There's no way to escape.
It go away. Yeah. So it's how to get feedback loops in your personal agility. One of the to go back to what we were talking about earlier, one of the key things there is coaching. Having a coaching relationship with another coach. They can help. The feedback's here a lot of times, but actually helping you to step aside from, you're not going to lose it or forget it or get rid of it right away, but step aside from your confirmation bias to look at it from the outside. Having a skilled coach to help you to do that with your personal workflow can be really helpful. And what I'm thinking about there is not so much the personal Kanban that I have with my partner, get groceries and pay the bill and, that sort of thing, not so much that, but where there's a bigger personal project. I think a lot of times personal agility for people might start and stop with the home Kanban board that you have on the back of the cupboard door that has your week tasks that you have to do for the household. Whereas with the buy a house or the big things, the big projects, we don't always, we might put the tasks on there, but we don't always, step back and say, okay, well, let's follow the entire agile life cycle. What is the goal? What is the success criteria of buy house? Why are we buying the house? And then, starting to break down your structured decision-making from there, that sort of thing. So following the entire life cycle and having feedback loops in place through that life cycle.
That's really interesting, especially indeed for the larger projects. I have I've written a whole book about constructing a house that we did a few years back about about all the things that I used from the agile world. When I look back after I finished it, I think Johanna Rodman said, well, it feels more like a memoir that like you've written it. So it's less clear how useful it is for other people. But for me, it was useful to just write it down and to think about, okay, what are the tips and tricks that I want to take away from it, both to share, because I've noticed that in the years afterwards, I talked a lot about all the things I've learned, but also sometimes for other people that, okay, and like you say, feedback loops, what are the ways? Okay, we had problems with, I don't know, with constructors. It turns out it's actually very important when you contact the constructor to know what's the best way to contact you. Some people prefer phones, others prefer text messages. If they're building a house, they won't pick up the phone when they're on the roof. They prefer to have a text message that they can reply every whatever than when they're not up on the roof. And others prefer, oh no, give me an email in the evening, I will reply. And just knowing what's the best way to contact them was life-saving for us. But yeah, it was not something I thought about before. And that's the kind of thing, if you work in a structured agile way, you can think about it, and you can think about what are the different ways to deal with that kind of stuff. I like that.
It's going next on my reading list, Eve, because it's a relevant thing for me right now. So although we're still at the build versus buy, but that's still relevant.
Yeah, well, now I'm going into that. I didn't want plan to story, but when I showed the picture all in the beginning, so if people are interested, you go back, look at the very first picture where I showed where we live. The house that you see is the old house, and we built another one in the garden, and then we tear down the old one.
Cool.
So that's yeah. The whole thing is in the book. I'll link it to the
Okay.
people interested, and I'll give you the link later on, Will.
Yeah, please do.
It's a digital book that I don't remember anymore. It's less than 200 pages, I think. But I've written about the whole thing, that how I learned it and what I've learned from it. Because yeah, I don't want to go into is IT and building a house. There's lots of different things from it, but we can still yeah, the metaphors we can still learn from each other sometimes.
Yeah, and it's it's
And
it's
like
it's relevant too, because what's the, working with, I worked with some infrastructure teams, infrastructure engineers and network engineers, things like that. And how many times did I have the conversation of, oh, would you build a house in an agile way? No, you wouldn't. Actually, yes, I would. So, how many times have we had that conversation?
Well, there is a lots of examples in there. That's one of the questions I ask people. What's the minimum requirement? What do you need for moving to the house? And for us, that was a very interesting question, because we had a house and we had a new house in the garden, and so we had to take a decision at what point is the new house better than the old house, and what do you need? Do you need already a kitchen? Do you need already bathroom? Well, actually, if you have another house 50 meters away from that decision is completely different. And the old house had some problems. Actually, the technical debt was really high on the old house. So that was the reason why we were building a new one, because we realized that changing it and the technical debt was just too high. So it didn't make any sense to try to repair it, which we thought about for 5 years until we realized, no, this is not going to work. And then there is some point that you need to decide, oh, the new house is actually already better than the old one. We still might use some features from the old one. Like, for example, I took showers in the old house for more than 2 months, because yeah, there was no shower yet in the new house, but we could live in the new house and take a shower in the old house, because that's the other part was better for sleeping and whatever. So and then you indeed see that yes, you can gradually move to a new project and
Yeah,
yeah,
how relevant.
not have
It's
everything.
very,
So it's
very, very relevant.
so there's a lot that we can learn from it. Of course, it's different because it's in a garden and because there's things, but yes, you can do some of that in different things.
Mm.
But I also learned a lot from it as a coach, because before I would always say, technical that you can rechange your project and make it better, and I had to admit that, oh, wait a minute, this old houses will actually, we tear it down about at the moment that it would become 100 years old. So I think a year before it
Oh,
would become 100 years old. So in that sense, it was really old and the technical debt was really too high. And there is a moment that you have to realize, well, we didn't support the house enough, or whatever, the previous owners didn't support it enough, and no, the technical debt is too high. It actually makes more sense to replace it with something new.
yep.
And that's something that I would never have accepted before on a technical project. I would always think that the owners made the wrong decision when they replaced something. And now I realize that no, I did that as a business owner, as a owner of the house. I took that same decision because I realized that it was just too expensive, and it would not have made sense. And probably if you replace a house or gradually remodel a house, there will always be what we say in Dutch, there will always be corpses falling out of the closets. The problem is you know there were going to come problems, but you don't know where, how
Yeah.
big and how expensive they are. And with a new house, you kind of know the problems. It's always more expensive, it's always harder. So I'm not saying there's no problems, but it's more predictable where the problems are going to be.
It
And
also
so
depends
that's
on what your acceptable level of tech debt is, and with the house, depending on its purpose or why you have it, what what it's there for to begin with. It might be that you're fine with it falling apart and just a shack. It might be an acceptable level of debt. You might trade off. We're not going to do the maintenance on this house because it's doesn't need to last for a long time. It's we're willing to accept a high amount of technical debt because it has the location we want, or whatever the reason is. It depends on what's acceptable. Sometimes it's
it feels like you have already read the book that I've written.
Oh yeah,
because that's it's.
I'm going to read it anyway because I haven't. But
but at the moment that we took this decision to build a new house, we almost automatically decided, let's not spend any money on the old house anymore, which is kind of logical. But at some point, the house challenged us with that, because at some point the heating stopped working. So we were living in an old house and we couldn't heat it anymore because how's it called? The thing that would help us to heat our house broke down, and it would cost us 20,000 euros to fix it. Yeah, we're not going to do that in something that we're only going to stay for what we thought at that time was 3 more months. Of course, it turned out to be 9 more months because building projects take longer. But yeah, that's the moment that you take decisions. Let's not spend any more money on an old thing. And even if that's a problem, and yeah. But it also helps to make other decisions, because the moment I saw my daughter eating in the old house in, well, not freezing cold, but still she was wearing a hat because she was on the table and it was cold. That was also the moment that we said, okay, we're going to move that moment, and we fixed the date to say that's the deadline. Because yeah, we realized maybe the new house is better. It's warm. And the old one isn't warm. It doesn't have all the features, the new one, but it does have one feature that we care about, that is heating.
Yeah,
so that's that.
In Belgium, that's a bit more important than it might be here in Australia. You want that feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. Indeed, the environment is very important. If it's in Africa or Australia, that's probably a completely different kind of decision that you need to take. That's so yeah, there's lots of these things. Now we completely moved on into multiple parts, but interesting stories. Well, except that I talk more, and the goal is to have my guests talk more. But okay, let's move to that next one about remote working. And you said it before. You worked from the United States. You worked for your Australian clients. I assume that over the years, well, you also talked about keeping contact with your family for a long period. You had a lot of experience there, I assume. Is there anything that you can share? Any tips that you want to share with us?
I've most of my life has been remote working. I guess I had a business back in the States. I referred to it earlier, but building websites and things like that early in the 2000s. We did remote work before it was cool. It wasn't a lifestyle thing so much as a doing a startup on the cheap sort of thing. But learned a bunch about remote working, and just being back in the States recently, I guess I relearned some things, just how to work in time zones, how to if you're working with people that are in a time zone different from you, you have to quickly translate in your head that time zone. You don't talk about morning and night in terms of where you are. It's about the people you work with, things like that. I think I think we've all learned a lot about working remotely in the last couple of years. We haven't had a choice. I think whilst some of the patterns, it was just falling back into old patterns for me that I had already had, and remembering some of the old discipline that I used to do. In other words, I need separation between work and my life, and that doesn't have to be physical separation. Especially whenever that's not possible. But I'm one of the people that If I'm working from home, I wake up in the morning at the exact same time. I follow my exact same routine. I read the news. I eat my breakfast. I have my morning coffee. I go and have a shower. I put on normal work clothes. I walk out my front door, walk around the block, come back in my front door, directly to my office, and go to work. And that's my hack for separating my life from my work. At the end of the day, I walk out.
So like a kind of false commute, something like
Correct.
that.
Correct. And that as we habit forming, neuroplasticity, things like this, it's as we form the habit and we train our brain to switch on and off from work, that's what's worked for me. So it's remembering some of those things that I used to do. That was something that I had to relearn over the past couple of years. I think we've all learned how to deal with tech issues and how to be patient with people that are dealing with tech issues. We have them. It happens. It's life, especially whenever you're all working remote. I think for me, though, the most interesting thing about working remote, and it's not something I've learned yet, but I'm very keen to learn what our future looks like. One of my most hated phrases, yet relevant, over the pandemic, is this concept of new normal. I don't like that phrase because it's just normal. It's what's new today will be old tomorrow. I don't like this concept of new normal. Something about it doesn't resonate with me. But now that we're in 2022 and organizations are following one of three main paths. They're either they've gone all in with remote working. They're staying all in with remote working. They are pulling people back into the office and say, we're going back to the way things used to be. And then there's a middle ground, this concept of flexible work. And what I'm keen to learn is, as a global community, which pattern is going to emerge as the dominant one. I think we've all heard about the Great Resignation and things like that, and some of the motivation behind that. People wanting to, number one, find work that matters to them, above just a job for a job's sake, and number two, people wanting to have more flexible work, which is driven by this work-life balance idea. And as that starts to emerge, the first pattern of pulling everybody back into the office and say we're going back to the way it is. I suspect those organizations are going to find it hard to attract and retain talent. That's my hypothesis. I think it's already playing out, but and I also think that there's some problems with the middle ground. I think in this middle ground of some, this ultimate flexible work where some people are remote, some people aren't, in and out of the office, that sort of thing. You lose an element of culture. You lose that sense of team. Whereas with all remote and staying, 100% remote team, I think you can have that, but it's really just the middle ground where it seems to kind of get lost, and it's one of the things that's topical for me with the organizations that I'm working with, but also just with, I think, all of us as workers, is understanding how we can navigate to create the future normal.
I like that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, definitely everybody back to what it used to be, like you say. This is where, for me, the phrase "new normal" makes sense, because the old normal doesn't make any sense anymore. But like you say, it is normal. It shouldn't be the new normal. It's the normal.
It's 2 years old now. It's not new anymore.
Exactly. And some people have to realize that hey, we've learned something over the years. We've learned that it actually works a lot better than we think. Some people, well, I think what I see, if I just look at some of my clients, that the people that pull everybody back or partially back, like you say, is more that they haven't figured out how to make it work, which is really sad. Is after 2 years you haven't. I see this also I've been to an information evening tonight about at the university in my hometown, and what I heard, I had a good conversation with someone. I seem to have, yeah, okay. I thought I lost visual, but I'm back. No, like I was saying, I've had a conversation with someone at the university that said, okay, we've invested into a lot of things, and for this person, it worked really well. He used some students to help out on how to connect with students from over the internet, basically. And then at the same time, I heard another people that are teachers in high school and things like that have totally not invested, because their school and their minister says, no, we're always going back, and they have not invested in time and resources on how to work remotely. And of course, for them, there is no other solution than to go back, because they have, after 2 years, they still haven't learned how to do this. Which is kind of sad, because for me, it meant you had 2 years of experimenting, and it would have been easy to experiment with something, try out, and if it doesn't work, you can always blame it on the pandemic, and then later on says, okay, we're going back. But now it feels like a waste of time if you haven't experimented with what works and what doesn't work.
And I think it's also, even where it has worked, one of the I was working with a government organization right at the beginning of the pandemic, and the right as everybody was going to work from home, and this was an organization that was not particularly well set up for remote working. That just was not a thing. Which was fine for them and worked for them at the time, but had to very quickly figure it out. So because the teams were pivoting to deliver some critical infrastructure pieces to help Australia as a country get through the pandemic. And
kind of important at that moment.
Yeah, very important, incredibly important. It was a super interesting time. And just fascinating from a team perspective, but also from a government perspective. But the point though is that when the team set up and started working remote, so this is about there were 7, I think, I might have the number slightly wrong, but 7 Scrum teams that we were working with as this value stream in the organization, and it took about a sprint and a half to really get the remote working thing kind of going a little bit. Once it was, throughput was way up at a feature level as well as a user story level. Cycle time started dropping. Quality, all our quality metrics are pointing in the right direction. Everything was pointing in the right direction. It worked. And then but even with other organizations that I've worked with and spoken to, where it's worked and the remote working's gone well and the metrics prove it. But I think still, once as we emerge, in 2022 and beyond, there's a feeling that's there of, whew, thank God that's over. Let's all get back to the office. Hang on. Why? And I think a lot of it, I if I'm completely honest with myself, there's an element to it of are people working remote for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? It's and I think some people have an entire career. Some leaders, senior leaders, have an entire career of thinking one way, and as coaches, we know what it takes to change people's thinking, and it doesn't happen overnight. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do in helping to support and work with these leaders through the future normal.
Yeah, you have the tendency to use phrases that are like really much indeed, like you say, is it for the right or the wrong reasons? And sometimes it like you say, it's working, and then we somehow want to go back for. In a lot of cases, it's for control. In a lot of cases, it's because we think it's all better, and sometimes it's because we all want to work all in the same way. Well, wait a minute. For some people, it actually was working better. I see a lot more people. Well, I hear people who were struggling going to the office for physical reasons, for example,
Hmm.
that are saying this is a lot better. So inclusion is much better if we can figure it out. And indeed, for some people, they like to work. Some people they don't have the right setup at home, and will never have that right setup, and then it's fine that we can go back to the office, but like you say, for the right reasons. And we might want to figure out what works well, and what's the combination. And the combination could be something like you say in a hybrid work for some teams. Maybe we have to reorganize our teams for a team that works fully remote, a team that works fully at home, and maybe avoid these kind of hybrid teams, and have kind of hybrid meetings cross teams. Okay, let's figure out what's really working best. um, and like you say, a lot of people want to go back to the old normal, but that's gone. For me, it's completely gone. Yes, we might go to a new kind of normal that looks very similar to the old kind of normal for the right reasons, but let's at least talk about that.
Yeah, it's situational. I don't think the old normal is going to be gone completely. I think there's going to be some types of organizations that it will make sense to
Hmm.
continue to have people in an office. For some people, like being in an office. They want that. They are thankful that they
Yeah,
can go back to
exactly.
an office 5 days a week, 9 to 5. It's what they want to do. It's what works for them, and that's cool. I think they should have the opportunity, or be able to do that. But it's, I think our job as coaches and as leaders, thought leaders, is to work to provide an environment where people can do their best work. And I think what we've learned is that isn't a binary thing. That environment is different
Exactly.
on an individual basis. And we need to, out of respect for the people that we work with, we need to provide environments where people can do their best work to realize their potential. Back to that.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've noticed over the last 2 years is that in the office might be a lot better for, well, definitely is again an exaggeration, but it's rather good for many people who are more extrovert. Yeah. And so a lot of introverts like it more at home. Again, this is not always the same thing for all extroverts and all introverts. I'm not saying that. And who are the people who are most vocal about what they like? Typically more the extroverts. And that gives sometimes the wrong impression to a lot of leaders, like, oh, everybody wants back to the office. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the most shouty people and the most extroverted people who are talking to you, and the others might actually prefer it more at home, and might actually be a lot more productive at home for reasons that are their personality. And again, I know also some introverts who really love to go back to the office, so it's not 100% for one or the other, but
Mm.
it people are different, and I think that's the real important thing. So that's a good takeaway, to look back, and why are we going back to the office? Why are we staying? Because it might also be wrong. It might be that we'll all go fully remote, and maybe most of our people don't want that, so that might be a wrong thing to do it as well. So
Mm.
that's that might the other part be.
Yeah. I think it's a big criteria for people looking for, in the job market right now. It's the first question. What's your flexibility policy? Do you guys work in the office? Do you not? And it's not like there's a right or wrong answer. I think people are genuinely curious, will this fit me? Will the working style at this organization fit me? And that might be
I,
in the office. It might be remote. It might be a mix.
I heard one wrong answer to that question. Is that I heard about somebody, and I read it on Twitter, so I'm not 100% sure how truly its story it is, but that was like definitely the wrong answer. That's somebody who signed up for a new job that was partially remote, and when he signed up on the first day, or joined on the first day, he heard that, yeah, but the remote part is outside business hours. During business hours, you need to be on site. And I was
So
like,
your overtime is going to be remote.
exactly. And I was like,
Great.
okay, I hope that's a joke, but that's definitely a wrong answer to saying it's partially remote and it's partly online.
I'm gonna
And
go with
part,
joke on that, but
yeah,
we'll see.
that's why I'm saying it was yeah,
Yeah,
spread as it was not a joke, but I
yeah,
really hope it was a joke because it
me
felt
too.
so completely wrong.
Me too.
Yeah, it's so just to say, sometimes there are indeed some wrong answers to some of these questions.
Right.
Okay, I want to go into that next question about a book. Is there a book that you recently read that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I guess given that I was traveling recently, I had an opportunity to catch up on some of my reading list. So in my flights and things like that, I actually well, I read. I've been rereading the Dune series. Now that the movies are out, I'm rereading some of that. So yes, I work in IT. Yes, I like science fiction. But the but on a more topical, agility, I guess, or work-based thing. I read a couple. So I read Iron Sharpened Leadership by John Gronsky.
That's this
And
one, right?
yes, that's it. That's the one. And it's so he was a general in the U.S. Military, and some of his learnings from being a leader. I'm always exploring different thoughts on leadership. A lot of the teams that I work with most of the time are leaders, senior leaders, and the just getting different. There's an unending array of tips and topics. One of the things in John Gronsky's book that was super interesting is talking about situationally speaking what the cost of not making a decision is. So
Mm,
obviously, whenever we're talking about battle and war and things like that, what the cost can be of not making a decision. Sometimes you need to make a decision immediately. Sometimes you need to cede the power to make a decision to people that are at the coalface and let them do it immediately without any hindrance. And just kind of that structured thinking is interesting to me. Just around thinking about decisions that leadership face, and putting structured thinking around who should be making the decision, how quickly do you need to make the decision, that sort of thing. Um, Another book that I
because
also
yeah, sometimes not taking a decision is a decision on its own, and
correct.
yeah, and a
Correct.
dangerous one sometimes. If you're basically not taking a decision, like yeah, it's a decision, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
a very strange one.
And it's a variation on the just in time decision making. You want to gather as much information as possible about the decision up until the point where you start losing options because you've waited. So you want to find that sort of sweet spot where all of your options are available to you, yet you have as much information as possible. And then once you make the decision, executing it with alacrity, that sort of thing. So it's a variation of that. Yeah, but the decision making is something I'll probably geek out on for the rest of my life. It's how do we put structure around making decisions.
Mhm.
Another book I read on the plane, Michael Bungay Stanier, his book that he just released this year, How to Begin. Start doing something that matters. So this was super interesting. Probably maybe more on a personal basis. In that he talks about a lot of the book is focused on a worthy goal. So finding and sharpening a worthy goal. He describes a worthy goal as something that is thrilling, important, and daunting to you. So thrilling in that it excites you, gets you up out of bed in the morning. Important, not just for yourself, but for your wider community. And daunting in that it's not a sure thing. It's something that's going to, it kind of makes you sweat a little bit. And one of the things I really liked in that book was just how to, a lot of times we find ourselves saying, oh, we want to build a house, or we want to start a business, or we want to do these things. But, a lot of the structured thinking there, the process, he calls it a process, it is, that he actually guides you through. The book has a companion workbook that goes along with it where you can work on your own worthy goal. The process that he takes you through really helps you to dive into your what's really driving you towards that. What's the real why? It's a good process. One of the things that I'm also thinking about, I'm thinking about personal goals and things that I want to do, but also I'm thinking about how to apply this to be used within an organization as well. How do you find what a worthy goal might be for a team? If we think about Dan Pink, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, that's similar to the worthy goal of finding something that's thrilling, important, and daunting. It's these things are kind of relational, and how do we work with our teams to take them through a process of finding their own worthy goal. So that's something I'm thinking about extending what I learned in that book. But good stuff.
It's neither of these books are books that I've read, so or knew. I know, well, actually, the book from Michael Bungay, I have another book on my stacks of to read. He wrote, if I'm not mistaken, he's also the person who wrote The Coaching Habit.
Yes.
And that's a book that is on my list as well.
Put it up towards the top. One of my favorite books I've read in the past.
Okay.
I read it some years ago now, but the one of my, or maybe 2 years ago, something like that. But the one of my it was pretty impactful on how I coach and how I see coaching. It was very, very interesting.
So all of a sudden I have three more books to read. I should stop doing these interviews. I get too many other interesting books to read.
Too much stuff to learn.
Thank you. Yeah, too much stuff to learn. Why do we? No, but thank you very much, because it's also, for me, it's a way to filter things. Like I said, I have a lot of books on my stack to read, but it helps to put things higher up. If many people say this is a really good book, that's also one way to filter things, of course. I want to go to that, for me, probably most interesting question is that what's a question that I didn't ask that you think I should really ask you? And of course, what's the answer?
It's tough. The most interesting questions are the ones I don't know the answer to. So that's a hard one to answer. I suppose along that vein, if we think about how we started talking today, what's the career bike path? I guess maybe what's next for me. And I don't know the answer to it. I know the direction. I know it'll be coaching. I know that's me. That's Ikigai. That's not going to change. But I think one of the things that I'm most interested in right now is what we were talking about around remote work. How we help to. I'm really keen to help organizations find the right balance and the right mindset towards how towards the flexibility they give their teams. That's what's interesting to me now with the world, and I think there's a lot at stake with it. It's thrilling, important, and daunting for all of us, because it's we're not going back to the old normal. That's not going to happen. But it's people want more space to do what's important for them, whether it's family or a personal project or whatever it is, and I think that we're right on the cusp of a pretty big shift with how we work and how we live. To me, that's exciting and challenging and all the things, and I'm really keen to dive in and start working on that for myself, but also for the organizations that I'm working with. So that's what's on my mind for what's next. I don't know the answers for what it's going to look like, but I'm keen to be part of figuring it out.
Well, but I think it's good also to just to ask that question, indeed, what's next. And somehow what I've noticed is that in this series, there's a lot of people asking similar kind of question. What's next for Agile? What's next for me? What will the future bring? Um, if I compare it, so this series of videos started out as actually on my blog more than 10 years ago, just with people answering these questions in text. And I noticed that actually a lot more people these days are asking about the future. Before there was lots of different kind of questions, all interesting as well. But now there seems to be kind of a lot of people merging or moving into that, okay, what's next for the future for Agile, for us, for me? So different, well, I would say teams around that future. So that's really interesting just to see how many people are thinking about that.
Mm.
I think the pandemic made us think a lot about, hey, what's in it for my life? Is this worthwhile? Okay, like you say, working from home, we win a lot of time, but it also made us, well, some of the one of these persons that I talked about earlier on at university said, well, I've never seen my children so much as in the last 2 years because I was always working from home and there was actually a lot more
And
interaction.
that's going to trump work.
Exactly.
That's, we if we think about, I mean, think back to Maslow again. I mean, I don't know why I'm referring to Maslow a lot, but if we think about the hierarchy of needs, that's, if we start to challenge that now, we need to do that very carefully and probably think about not doing it, because it's going to have unexpected results, or expected results, I suppose.
Depending on how you look at it, if people are asking us all to go back to the office and not think about these parts, it will be unexpected for them, but more expected for people like us who've been thinking and warning about it. It's
That's it.
And yeah, I think we gradually moved. Well, if I just look at how the life was for my parents and their parents, life has changed dramatically since World War II, in lots of different ways, and a lot more people were working from home or some kind of things, and we moved a lot more into office work and knowledge work in the
Mhm.
last, let's say, 50 to 80 years, depending on when you start counting. And now we realize, wait a minute, is that actually what we want to do? Do we always want to do that? And yes, we want to have that knowledge work because that brings a lot of value, but at what cost? Lisa Atkins in the same so in this podcast series said the same thing. She said, like, yeah, I've been traveling and going to different parts of the world without thinking much in the past. And she says very clearly, if I move to another country, it's not like she doesn't want to do it, but she wants to start that conversation with these clients. Why does it bring more value to have me come to speak in person to doing this remotely? What's the value? And in a lot of cases, she says, I don't see that value.
And
Not for me being away from my family and my friends for that long period.
Same's true
Um,
for me. Now that I've been away from my family for that extended period of time, both with some personal things in my family life, but also just how I personally feel about that absence for years. I'm very keen to start spending more time in both countries, not more one or the other. It's not a binary thing for me which country I'm in. It's that's those days are gone. It's I want to spend more time in both. And what is the value of me being in person? And early on in the pandemic, whenever it first was bam, instant work from home, there was a decision point that I took of my chosen career. Can I coach remotely? I hadn't yet. I hadn't done that. I had been an in-person coach for my entire coaching part of my career. I'd worked remotely in the past and things with development teams and stuff like that. But as a coach, it had always been, and I had always relied on building rapport face to face. And I had a decision point. Can I, or should I, will I? And the answer was yes. We keep moving forward. I always have, it's me. I have a bias for action. Some people call it the American pew 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 thing, but it's just a bias for action. It's me.
mhm.
So I said, yeah, well, let's run a series of experiments and see if we can make it work. And fact of the matter is, yes, it works. It wasn't even that
Yeah.
hard. Really, it wasn't that hard. Had to run experiments, had to use agility to find the best answers and how to do it, but found them. And now that I know that's possible, and I believe it at a deep level that it is, and I think I can have as big of an impact with individuals and organizations. With a mix of remote and in person, I'm keen to leverage that.
Yeah, and I think you said the right thing. It's about doing these experiments and having that opportunity, because let's face it, COVID forced us to doing that. And I had been coaching for, well, actually, my first time I worked with a remote team was back in 2005. Well,
Yep.
one of the things
About
I
the
would
same.
kind of called me a coach at that time. So I've been doing some coaching at that moment. It was more on the technical side, but still. Um, and I had really good experiences with it, even at the moment that I was really doubting about myself. Well, wait a minute, everybody in the agile world says remote work can't work, and it kind of works for me. So I was doubting myself. Um, but and ever since I've been saying, okay, I want to have more experiences with that and doing it more. And it was hard to find more people to do that. So every year I was coaching a few people, but there wasn't not many companies who were interested in paying money to do that full-time remote coaching. And now basically I get contacted at least once a week for other people, and to say, oh, you want to help out and want to do this. So times are indeed changing. People see value from both sides, because of course, if I would go for 1 hour just to coach a person in a company that didn't bring any value for them or for me, either I had to charge half a day because of travel and whatever, and that didn't bring, or I should be there a full day, but might not be interested. And now I have that kind of opportunities.
Yep.
I still need to figure out a little bit the logistics around timing. For example, just like now, this is of course not a coaching conversation, but it's past midnight, so I still need to figure out some of my agendas. So some of these things, but it's possible. I can work with people from Australia. I can work with people from basically all around the world. I just need to figure out my agenda and make sure that I still have time for my family, that I still sleep enough hours, and that's it. And
Yeah.
then we can make it work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. I want to go to that last question about who do you want to invite next?
So I'm quite certain about this answer. I think that a super interesting person for you to speak with next would be a woman by the name of Deanne Whiffen. Dee is a coach I've worked with for several years now, and she's definitely one of the up and coming people in our agile and in our coaching community. Super interesting story, fantastic coach. I think you'd have a good conversation with her.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much. It's a person I've never met, I even heard about, but that's one of the advantages of talking to people from different parts of the world, because that's how I get to know a lot of new people, and that's one of my goals for this series as well. Thank you very much for your time, Will. If people would be interested in contacting you, what would be a good way to get in touch with you?
Best way to reach out would just be on LinkedIn. Just Will McNelis on LinkedIn.
That's the level. That's the address. Where is it here? A little bit. That's it. Somewhere depending on, yeah. It's yeah. The logistics of recording is still sometimes figuring it out, and that's one of the disadvantages of not editing too much, because otherwise I could have just re-recorded until I've pointed the finger to the right moment. But thank you very much for your time.
And
It's
thank you.
been
Really
a wonderful
appreciate you.
time.
Yeah.
It's again one of these little bit longer conversations, also probably due because I've spent a lot of sharing on my part. but it was so inspiring. It really made it into a real live conversation. So thank you very much for your time.
No worries, and thank you for inviting me. It's been likewise. It's been a great conversation and very inspiring for me. So, thank you.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of
Bye-bye.
agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.